Good evening from Swansea wrestling fans. I'm your host, Ben Allison, and you are listening to Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast, your one-stop shop for pro wrestling insight, news, and reviews on a daily basis. Last night was a Saturday night's AEW Collision, and it seems to be a little bit of a controversial episode. I certainly thought that it took, a little bit of inspiration from WWE shows with the formula of it, but was that a bad thing, or was that a good thing for all elite wrestling? We'll be getting into all of that and more today, but firstly, let me introduce the co-host of the show, Clark Taylor. How are you today, Clark?
I'm doing well. Happy Sunday, everybody. These weeks are flying by. It's ridiculous. I feel like I was just on last Sunday's show yesterday, but it's not actually the case. I'm stoked to be back once again, and let's get right into it. I mean, we've got some new guys. I don't want to bury the lead.
You're stealing my gimmick again.
I know. I love to step on the toes in the intro if I can. Just get it out of the way early.
If this was a prediction show, I'd steal your predictions as a receipt. But also joining us, we have Ignacio. How are you, Ignacio?
Pretty good, Ben. Another good day here in Houston, Texas. Ben, I got a quick question for you, real quick. Did you see yesterday's show?
I have not seen it in full yet. No.
Okay, I just want to bring up something I brought up to Clark yesterday in the panel from yesterday. I think David should be suspended.
Oh,
I think he should be suspended for at least a week for 2 violations, in my opinion. That he tried to tell me that he tried to, in his own way, tried to tell me that he knows more than me about wrestling, and he obviously doesn't. And also, he was unprepared for a segment, which I think is in my opinion, is a violation, and I think you should look that over and think about suspending him.
Well, we're gonna have to talk about that for sure.
This may need to be taken to the table.
David's take on it is.
All right.
I was gonna say this might need to be taken to the table. Just a suggestion.
All
right.
I'll have to give Chaos a ring for that. But let's talk about somebody who's new at the table, and that is the new person joining us here at Wrestling Republic, Bret Sternberg. How are you, Bret?
I'm good. How's everyone doing? Hope everyone's having a happy Sunday. Let's get right into it. There's a lot to talk about from yesterday.
There absolutely is. And let's jump right into how the show opened, how AEW Collision opened. And that was with Ricky Starks, because he came out and there was a lot of pyro for him. There really, really was. And he cut a promo and he was absolutely, really selfish heel. But he wasn't one of those heels which, hated the crowd. He was just a heel who was about himself. And because everybody just loves Ricky Starks, or at the very least did in that arena, everybody cheered him anyway. And then just to make things worse, CM Punk came out and everybody booed him. So this segment clearly didn't go the way AEW wanted, but it was still a lot of fun. They handled it really well. CM Punk was the absolute veteran and leaned into it perfectly. He kind of took on the heel role. I loved it. It was a great segment. Christian and Luchasaurus then interrupted quite weirdly because they were scheduled. They were forced to appear, so they wanted to get it at the start of the show so they could just get it out of the way. And then Darby Allin came out, and of course Darby Allin won the Royal Rampage this week on Rampage, meaning that he has earned a TNT Championship opportunity against Luchasaurus at All Out in September. So yeah, they say, but it was kind of that there was a lot of different people involved in it, and it was very WWE-esque, and in a way which WWE has done over and over again over the years. It led to a match in the main event with Darby Allin teaming up with CM Punk to take on Christian Cage and Ricky Starks, and we'll get on to the match later on today. But let's firstly talk about this segment. Clark, I've spoken about how this clearly took inspiration from WWE, but do you think this was a good thing or a bad thing for All Elite Wrestling?
I don't think it hurt. I think it was a great way to handle things for both Punk and Starks. I think there was a lot of talk coming out of the match in the first place about did we turn the right wrestler, right? And basically they showed us they kind of turned both.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, I had no issue with the segment, and it set up for a match that ended up being fun. Of course, you know me. I always love Punk. I've got my Chicago shirt on now. Dissing the New Jersey Devils was hilarious to me. I'm a Blackhawks fan. I dug that. It was classic. And yeah, I didn't have an issue with it. And I understand where you're coming from on the WWE thing, but it didn't feel like a blatant ripoff or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just sort of a technique booking wise it's been used in the past. So
Yeah.
I had no problem with it. And to get Ricky Starks that level of pyro, that level of exposure right out of the gates on Saturday night in prime time, I think is great. I'm a big believer in Ricky Starks as a talent. I think he's world class on both the microphone and he's getting better and better in the ring every time. And not that he needed to, but he does be putting on better matches, which is impressive in my eyes because I thought his baseline already was high, right? And the fact that he keeps elevating his game and throwing in little wrinkles like grabbing the ropes, the turn that we didn't expect, I'm cool with it. As long as he can build upon it from here, I'm all for it. And I'm a fan of both Starks and Punk. And I thought it was handled well. And then you throw Christian into the mix, you got a lot of heel work on the microphone.
Yeah, so it was certainly a lot of fun. And Tony Khan, when he first, started AEW and started AEW Dynamite, said that he wanted to take the approach of announcing everything that was going to happen on a show before it happened. And a lot of people like that. A lot of people, like knowing what they were going to watch. And it certainly worked well for them at times. But at the same time, it's kind of made Dynamite feel, dare I say, predictable occasionally. So I am actually glad that Collision is taking an approach where they're not announcing everything and makeshift matches can happen regularly. In fact, nearly every week. I really do like that. So I like the fact that Dynamite's one way and then Collision takes a different approach. So I'm personally not complaining about it at all. But what about you, Ignacio? Did you like it?
Yeah, I think Collision is very well produced. A lot different from well, you can see the distinct differences between Collision and Dynamite, and I think you have WWEF people who work for WWE, WWF structuring the Collision program. I just really think that's what it is, and I like my favorite segments were the first and the last, and I know we're going to get into the last later, but I thought this was very good. It presented Ricky Starks as a star because he looks like a star, he acts like a star, he dresses like a star, he talks like a star. So I don't necessarily think that maybe they are, obviously they're trying to make him a heel, but the crowd is with him. So he's kind of going to be the in between, the tweener, where he's going to try to be the heel, but everybody just likes him. You know what I mean? So, and I don't think they're necessarily gonna. It was a double turn with him and Punk. I think Punk at this point, either half the crowd's gonna like him, half the crowd's gonna hate him. It's gonna be like a college football game or whatever. It's just Punk's Punk. But I think with Ricky Starks, I think he has a tremendous push coming to him, and I think he deserves it. Not only does he deserve it, I really think he's going to be the one eventually if they build it right, and it could be 6 months, could be 9 months, could be a year, but I really do think he should be the one if built right to take the title off of MJF.
Wow.
I like everybody in this segment. Christian Cage, what can you say about Christian? Christian, he's been one of the better promos there ever since he got there. One of the better acts since he's gotten there, and his performance in the opening segment and in the last segment was truly what everybody in AEW should be looking at to mimic or to emulate. And Punk is punky. This it was just a good first segment, man. It's just organized. It told a story. It made everybody stay tuned till the end. And the only thing I'll say is I wish. Well, I'll get into the last segment, but overall, yeah, it was the second best segment, along with the last segment, which was the first best segment. I enjoyed it. That was very good, very well produced.
We'll make sure to get onto that later on. But Ignacio, you said something there which was quite interesting, that perhaps it might be 9 to 12 months before we see MJF drop the title. Does that mean you think MJF is going to stay with AEW?
Yeah, I mean that's. I think this whole. With the race for 24, what does it call it? The bidding war for 2024. I mean, for MJF to make that stink he made last year, which it was probably reality come to life on screen and all that stuff. I really do think that he has signed some kind of extension, at least through the next year or so, or through 2024. I don't think there's no true bidding war for 2024. I think, look, because, and I'll be real brief on this because we can talk about this all day. Like MJF is not going to get away with what he could get with in AEW and WWE. And I think one of the things that's MJF has an issue with is that I don't think, or it would take some coaching for him to be as big a star in AEW to be in WWE, because he would have to tone it down a little bit, stop going after the fans, stop touching fans, and tone down the rhetoric a little bit. And I don't know if he'd be able to pull that off. I think maybe he would only be able to get away with it in AEW.
That's very fair, and I mean that is very similar to what Clark has said a lot in recent weeks, and a lot of people disagreed with him when he said it. But slowly, more and more people are agreeing with him. But I still do think there will be that bidding war of 2024. But maybe I'll be proven wrong. But Bret, what did you think about this opening segment on Collision?
So the opening segment was actually pretty good. I do think the production is definitely coming from WWE/WWF people that have worked with them in the past, because you can easily tell they're two different shows, completely different shows, how they're produced. When it comes to the fireworks, everything. You saw the fireworks last night. I was looking at my watch. They literally lasted almost 2 minutes. I was like, what is going on right now? I thought there was some type of error or something. I didn't know what was going on, but it was really, I think that they gave Ricky his time. I think they should have kind of let him simmer for a little bit, let him do his thing before having Punk come out. I think Punk kind of made this segment a bit bland for me, because I was like, I understand where they're going with it, the storyline and everything, but it was just Punk just gets me disappointed week after week right now, just because he's not producing really good stuff. Nothing good is coming out of his mouth, in my opinion.
Wow.
I think that he should have really leaned hard into the heel role, and he hasn't yet, which is why he's also getting a lot of the boos that he's getting right now, in my opinion. If he did lean into the heel role a little more, I feel like he would probably be a little better with the fans, because they would be like, okay, this is Punk. This is what we're getting. But I feel like they're trying something that is almost forced at this point with him.
Yeah.
Luchasaurus and Christian, I was kind of like, why is this happening right now? Also, they haven't really made, are they going to go back and forth as the champion, or is Christian just the champion now? Because that really isn't too clear, as well as Darby. I don't know, that whole first segment was, I get where they were coming from. It's very WWE-esque when it comes to the style of it, but I just feel like it was, I don't know, they could have done better.
Fair enough. I mean, I do get what you're saying, especially with Luchasaurus and Christian Cage. It is a confusing dynamic. Like, who is the TNT champion? I think that is the question they want us to ask, and I think they're starting to slightly tell it a bit better now. But the first few weeks, especially, they just did not make that clear. It's a very weird storyline, and I'm not actually sure if it's a storyline which is helping Luchasaurus in any way, to be honest about it. But I'm sure we'll talk about that at a later stage. I mean, I'm very interested about what you said about CM Punk, and you don't think that what he's been doing since he's come back's been that good. I mean, what do you think about it, Clark? Because of course you're a big CM Punk guy.
I kind of understand where he's coming from, what he's getting at. At the end of the day, look at what he's done since he's been back. He's basically worn 4 different gears, so we've got 4 new action figures that will fly off the shelves. He's a babyface in Chicago. They were in Chicago. He was basically a tweener in Canada. He came across as a heel here in New Jersey. He's adapted. He looks like Bret Hart in the late 90s. Bret Hart was a face in Canada. He was a heel in the United States, right? And the same for Shawn Michaels. It flipped. I don't think it's necessarily the greatest work of Punk's career since he's been back. I would agree with that for sure, but I would be a little bit less harsh only because he is clearly still the face of Collision, and opening and closing the show often. He's there every week, and he's polarizing. He may not be popular, He may not be a true heel. He may not be a true babyface, but at the very least, he's polarizing. And the thing about people that are polarizing is everybody watches, right? And that's something unique to Punk. And I think that's why he draws so many fans in. So I would say, while I do hear where you're coming from on, like, it hasn't been world Punk firing on all cylinders, right? We've seen what that can look like, where it just you can rock a crowd by talking or not talking, right? It hasn't been to that level yet, but we still do have CM Punk on TV weekly, and that's been, I would say, good enough for me so far.
Fair enough. And Bret, I'll give you a chance later on in the show to give more thoughts on CM Punk in that main event segment that we'll get onto. But let's quickly move on to the next topic, and let's talk about Bullet Club Gold. Now, a few weeks ago, me and Ignacio were on the show together, and we had a little bit of a debate about Jay White, about Bullet Club Gold. And since then, Jay White and Juice Robinson, well, they've had two bangers, matches on Collision 2 weeks ago against FTR, and then last week, the 2 out of 3 Falls match against FTR, maybe my match of the year so far. But last night, they took on Action Andretti and Darius Martin, and this certainly wasn't a match that I'd say which was, match of the year contender or anywhere near the standard of the ones from a couple of weeks ago, but it was still a fun segment, and it was nice seeing all of Bullet Club Gold together. That's what the only complaint I had last week was the fact the Guns weren't there and they didn't look like a stable together. Well, they were there this week and it was a lot of fun. But Ignacio, do you take back what you said about Jay White? Has Jay White changed your mind?
Not totally, but I would say this, that he's performed well. This is what I said about Jay White. I said Jay White can't lead a match on his own or really take the reins in a match. He needs a good supporting cast, and that's what he's had. He's had a good supporting cast these past couple of weeks. He's got Juice Robinson, who I think is a better worker and performer than he is, for that matter. A tremendous match with FTR in the Eliminator, tremendous match with FTR in the 2 out of 3 Falls. So I'm not totally taking it back. He's performed well, up to par. But this, the thing is that, so they had the Eliminator match, right? Great match. They had the 2 out of 3 Falls. Great match, right? I don't think it's tag team match of best tag team match in years or on TV or whatever. But people have been saying it's a good match. But then now you come back to, it's like, what if they lost it? They lost. They beat FTR. They lost. But so they go all the way down to the bottom with Andretti and Darius Martin, a makeshift Jay Brown indie tag team. I mean, this should have been a squash match, 2 to 3 minutes, to try to get Bullet Club Gold over again, to try to make them close to the number 1 contenders against FTR again, or MJF or Adam Cole. I don't think they're going to win the titles, but put them back up there again. Just give them another win on TV, or give them a break for a week, because they had just came off a tough match with FTR. Give them a break for a week. That way people can be clamoring to see them the following week. But I think this match should have been a squash match. I don't think too much of Andretti, even though at the beginning he cut like a little, the very first, the beginning, the start of the event, of the Collision, they have those independent, the talking segments, whatever. He did pretty good on that, but they probably took 200 takes, but he was pretty good. But I just don't think too much of Andretti, and I think it should have been a squash, and I think they should have given somebody else some time, like Powerhouse Hobbs in there or something, who I very much, or give the Gun Club a tag team match with somebody in there. This wasn't a tag team match. It was your modern day Barry the Ref tag team match with a flip and a flop and too much interference, and the other partner coming in too many times and interfering. The last segment, which we'll talk about, was more of an old school tag team match, the way tag team wrestling should be. But this is, this was a senseless segment, and I didn't think too much of the match. But Jay White, he's coming around to me, but not totally as an independent single star. I think he's good in a tag team because he has Juice Robinson in there. So I'm high on Bullet Club Gold as a tag team, at least in AEW standards.
Wow, okay, fair enough. I mean, to be honest with you, I really do think Jay White is going to impress you the more you see him. Because I've seen him, I've seen him for a long time in Japan, and he's worked fantastically with people, even when they aren't, they sometimes are a lot greener than he is. So I honestly think you're giving Jay White a bit too much criticism there, but who knows? We'll have to wait and see. I do agree with you though. Juice Robinson does not get the respect that he deserves, as he is great as well. And I'll also agree with you on, I think it probably should have been the Guns in that spot in, tag team match instead of Jay White and Juice Robinson, because we've seen a lot from Jay White and Juice Robinson the last couple of weeks and not so much from the Guns. So I do 100% agree with you there. But now let's talk about another tag team, specifically a trio tag team, and they go by the House of Black, the AEW Trios champions, and they took on the Acclaimed with Billy Gunn. And I thought that this was going to be, a very fun match. David actually said to me that he thought the title would change hands in this match. It did not. In fact, it was basically a squash match. And that's what it got in the Wrestling Republic system, because the match was too short for it to be anything else, really. At the end of it, which again wasn't very long, Billy Gunn left his boots in the ring, and he kind of had a little bit of a respect showing Malachi Black, and then the Acclaimed were also confused. So, Clark, the question I have for you is, do you think Billy Gunn actually has retired you, or do you think this is just all part of a storyline?
So I'll start with the answer to that question. No, I do not think Billy Gunn is retired. I absolutely think it's a part of a storyline. I think that's a no-brainer. I actually enjoyed, I'm wondering if this segment was cut time-wise for other segments, what they got out of such a short match and follow-up. I mean, commentary clearly sold that. Are we sure it was a sign of respect, or did they say something to Billy Gunn that made him take his boots off and do that, right? He was on fire at the very end for a minute till he took the lariat, until he took the black mass. And at the end of the day, I think this is storyline. This is pure storyline. And we're setting up for some sort of either triumphant daddy ass return or otherwise. And also, I'll say this, Billy Gunn is a legend in the business, absolutely, as a part of the New Age Outlaws and all of that. But I don't know necessarily that he gets the retirement tour.
Yeah.
Right? And so to give him the moment, even in kayfabe, even in storyline of actually putting the boots in the ring and hearing the crowd chant for him the way that they did, you still got it, and no, and show the appreciation. I don't mind the booking from that standpoint, because Billy Gunn does deserve that love and respect. And I don't know necessarily that he's going to be the guy that has the retirement match on a big show on a Saturday night in front of a sold out crowd, right? In the future. So even if it isn't the exact moment, it's kind of cool to give him that too. And that was kind of my biggest takeaway from it was, so we set up for whatever, the rematch, whatever story we're going to tell there with the Acclaimed and with Billy Gunn and then the House of Black. But then you also give him that moment with the crowd to take his boots off and do that. And so I was fine with it from that respect. It did feel though like it was a segment that was built to be longer than it was.
Yeah, no, that does. I do agree with a lot of that. And we got an interesting comment from Soul here. Shout out to Soul. And he is saying, do you think this will lead to House of Black versus the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn for the trios titles, with Billy Gunn's career on the line at All In? I mean, that would be interesting. It'd be I actually would not mind that at all. I think that would be fantastic. But the way that they did it, it wasn't like Clark, you said it, what was said. Well, Malachi Black said thank you to him. I believe that was what was said. They put their heads together. I think Malachi Black said thank you, because you could kind of hear it. And the commentators played it out like it was a sign of respect. So it would be a weird direction if that was the case, but perhaps I wouldn't be annoyed at that at all. And of course, then if Billy Gunn were to retire, All In, a big in a stadium, potentially 90,000 people in attendance. Well, that's the way to go out. I mean, Clark, do you see that happening?
I mean, it'd be really cool. And it'd be really cool for a guy of Billy Gunn's caliber, right? I think he's one of the most underrated wrestlers of my particular childhood era, right? In the Attitude Era, we forget he was an Intercontinental champion. He was with the Smoking Guns with Bart, he was as over as anybody for a time being, right? And then he joins up with DX and Road Dogg, and we all remember that. But Billy Gunn was always a guy that I never could figure out, outside of maybe being pigeonholed by the Mr. Ass gimmick.
Yeah.
How he never elevated beyond the mid card or the top of the tag. The tag team division made sense. Like, of course, he accomplished everything you can as a tag team wrestler, basically, right? He's in a top 10, 5. We can debate that later. Tag team of all time, arguably 2 top 100 of all time, right? If you include the Smoking Guns with Bart. Intercontinental champion, never quite to the main event scene, but his staying power, we forget. Then he goes to TNA and works in TNA, and early TNA, comes back and coaches in the WWE, has his fingerprints all over a lot of WWE talent from the Performance Center. Billy Gunn's a legend in this business without question and deserves his flowers. So I would have no problem with a retirement match at All In front of a crowd that size.
Absolutely. I mean, when you put it like that as well, you've sold me on it even more. But now let's move on to the next segment and let's talk about the one women's match on AEW Collision. Now, we've already spoken this week about the AEW women's division and how, well, they've got this, the standard one segment per week, and the theme continued on this show. Taya got to cut a promo after the match, but it was still really one segment. They need to change that. They really, really do, because Tony Khan is starting to get, criticism for it. And it's starting to, if you see some of the, the likes on Twitter from quite a few members of the AEW women's division this week on Twitter, it seems like they're getting frustrated as well. So that is not a good sign. But Taya took on Sky Blue, and it was actually quite a fun match. I really did enjoy it. I think both of these ladies are fantastic. And then after the match, Taya cut a really good promo. She did. And she called out Britt Baker for a match on Dynamite this week. And I do have a feeling that match is going to main event Dynamite. After all, the backlash this week about Tony Khan's booking of the women in AEW. But Bret, what did you think about this match and segment?
So I will say the match, all right, Sky Blue, great performer. Taya Valkyrie, great performer, legend. I think that this was Sky Blue's probably best performing match that she's had since being in the company for a few months now. Not ever, just for a few months now. But that's only because Taya carried her almost the entire way. It was literally like watching Taya train her in the ring. And it was and it wasn't a bad match. It was a good match, but it was very like, okay, this is what you're gonna do now. This is what you're gonna do now. But Sky Blue's getting better. Taya Valkyrie is kind of getting a little older. But I love her at that. Like I said, I do think her segment at the end was off the top of her head. I don't think any of that was planned, because the way she was just like pausing in between her words and looking around the crowd, it was almost like she was taking time to literally think. But that also gives you proof that Tony Khan literally doesn't care about this women's division. He literally he's like, yeah, just go out there, do whatever, I feel like. Or it was planned to the point where it was over planned, and they don't have enough wrestlers for Taya now to go ahead and call out on the next segment, which is sad because we only have a few wrestlers that will work in this division. So I think that we need to expand it. One, what do we have? 3 shows now on television. Let's expand it a little bit more than at least the single digit numbers, and give Taya more options of people to call out and build them up better.
No, I mean, that's a very fair point. It does feel like the roster is a bit thin at times in the women's division, but to be honest with you, it kind of has got quite a lot of talent in it now, right? If you can list all the names. They got Riho, they got Hikaru Shida, they've got I'm, you know me, guys. I'm really bad listing off the top of my head. You got Jamie Hayter, you got Britt Baker, you got Saraya, you got Ruby Soho, you got Willow. There are a lot of top talent in this women's division. But like you're saying, it just feels like they're just not thinking too much about the booking. And for the longest time, we did blame that on the lack of depth in the women's division. But at this point, I don't know if we can use that as an excuse anymore. I think at this point, it is really the booking, because I think they have potentially as stacked, of a women's division as Raw or SmackDown does. Not combined, but if you're saying either Raw or SmackDown, I think that AEW's women's division could go up against those. We got a couple of comments here. Firstly, from Morgan saying, I agree, the match was all right. And then from Jamal saying the women's division needs improvement. Yeah, I personally say it needs improvement in booking. But Bret, what would you say? Do you think it needs improvement booking-wise, or do you think they do need to make more signings to it as well?
Both. I think there's not enough attention given to this women's division, and I think they need to sign younger talent, but also let the older talent, not older talent, veterans, I should call them, because that's a little disrespectful when we call them older talent. Veterans teach this younger talent and bring them up. Like WWE's women's division is A1. It's amazing. And Triple H and Shawn Michaels have proven that through their storytelling and through their signings. And they sign young talent like Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair, and they come up and they build them up into these huge superstars. Why can't we have that over here?
That's a good point. That is a very good point. And I think that kind of goes back to the thing of, AEW probably need a performance center or something similar to that so they can do that. Because, Bianca Belair, you mentioned, she's fantastic. And she had no wrestling experience. I think she claimed she didn't even take a bump before she signed with WWE. But now let's move on to the main event match. And that was between Ricky Starks and Christian Cage taking on Darby Allin and CM Punk. The impromptu match that was announced earlier on in the episode. Something which I liked. And Ignacio, I know you were very excited to talk about this match because, yes, it was very much a fun match, and it got given quite a bit of time as well, like a lot of these AEW Collision main events have been getting. And Ricky Starks won, of course, in the same manner that he won in last week, with his hand on the rope. Controversial, but heel Ricky Starks is here. But Ignacio, what did you think about the segment?
Yeah, I thought it was very good. They started telling the story at the beginning of the show with all four of them in the first segment, and then that led to the final segment, which was a pretty good match, the way a tag team match should be. They didn't bury the ref. There was a couple of moments in the match you had interference, but it made sense. And Darby Allin, whenever it's time for him to put his part in, he always gives it, literally puts in 110%, puts his whole body behind the whatever he's going to do, whether that be a dive or coffin drop or whatever. And they need to get a little bit better, I think, as far as production wise, as far as like when somebody's waiting to receive the drop, don't shoot the guys there that are waiting to receive the job. We've said that. You've said that on the show 1,000 times, whatever. But this time it wasn't as egregious because by the time Darby set up, the guys were just Punk and the other guys that were getting up were just barely getting up, and it transitioned kind of well. It worked out, right?
Yeah.
And it works out like that in WWE kind of like all the time because they have good timing and so forth in the way they produce the shots. But very good match. It was nice to see a tag team match where they actually followed the rules, where both teams actually took the opportunity to cut the ring in half and isolated their opponents. Christian was phenomenal at the beginning of the match, where he was taking bumps like at the beginning, like kind of like a manager would, like slinging himself off the turnbuckles and stuff, and not really like a wrestler would, but he's kind of like half manager, half wrestler now. And that whole deal with just real quick, that whole deal with the TNT title is that he made the comment at the beginning. He made the joke to where Punk was referencing that he was the real world champion, and then he told Punk, he's like, "Well, I don't respect people who hold titles that they didn't earn, and he's holding the TNT title, and obviously it's Luchasaurus is the champion, right? And everybody knows that. It's just Christian's just, this is my title because this is my guy, and he's the muscle, but I'm really the champion. But everybody knows this bullshit. But yeah, it's a good match. It was nicely structured. It was paced very well because it didn't run long, but because you got 4 professionals doing what they do, performing the way they're supposed to perform in a tag team match, and because it was structured properly, probably by a well-experienced producer with Punk, who has a lot of experience, Christian, who made his name in tag team wrestling, who's a legend in his own part in tag team wrestling, who probably helped produce the match. And then you got Ricky Starks, who's very good. And then you got Darby Allin, who I forgot to mention at the beginning, who seems like he's coming into his own as far as promos also, because he didn't do bad at the beginning. He didn't do great, but from what he started in AEW 4 years ago to now, his promo skills are picking up, and he did very good at the beginning. The only thing I'll complain, the only complaint I have about the 2 segments is that, okay, so you started out at the beginning with a good segment, and then you came out at the end, and it made you look forward to the main event. But what I would have done, or what WWE would have done, is they probably would have put 1, 2, or at least 1 segment in between, probably with Christian and Ricky Starks, because even at the beginning, they showed that they had some friction. When you start first, no, you start first. When you start first, no. I would have put something in between, the beginning of the second hour, maybe, or something, to where, maybe Christian comes up to him and, hey, kid, whatever, this is how we're going to do it. I'm tag team, the 10-time tag team champion, ladder match, whatever, legend, and this is the way we got to do this. And Ricky Starks just tells him to kiss off and walk away or whatever. I would have did something like that to keep the story flowing through the episode and make you want to watch the main event even more. That's the only thing I would have done, changed.
I absolutely agree with that, Ignacio. One of those, I mean, they do it every week on Raw with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn whenever they have, like, a trios match or something like that. And they have like a partner, like Matt Riddle has been a partner a few times. They always do something like that. And yes, having Christian Cage and Ricky Starks interact backstage before, that would have been fantastic. I would have liked that. Would have built to it more. Perfect in my mind. But, Bret, what did you think about this main event?
I liked the main event. I think it was a good match. I think part of it was a little corny when Punk was kind of doing the high knees in each corner, like, hey, I can still do this. Like, yeah, thank you. But at the same time, I think they put on a great show. Punk is getting better and not as green with his performing now in the actual like in the ring, and not doing just anything to get himself hurt. So he's kind of going back to himself. I do think Ricky Stark's personality is perfect, and I think it needs to be, like, people are saying he's mirroring The Rock, and The Rock was almost a figure that didn't really kind of have he was in the face or a heel. People just loved him. He was the people's choice. I think Ricky needs to fall more into that boat. I think it was great, the mix that they had on television with Christian and Ricky. It was like they were going back and forth as well. It was funny. And then Punk and Darby. Darby always gives you a great match. You always expect the same move set from him, which is amazing. He's always going to give you, like Ignacio said, 120%. But it wasn't. I think they took way too much time up of this show.
Oh, wow. With
those 4. I think it should have been given to one other person that was given a tiny bit of time.
And who is that person?
That would be Miro.
Oh, okay. Nice. Yeah, no, I mean, that does, that makes a lot of sense. And he did have he just had that very quick squash match. And yeah, no, I do agree with that a lot. But Clark, what about you? What did you think about the main event? Did they take too much time with it?
Okay, it's funny. I'm going to take like kind of a different route here. Is it just me, or does Ricky Starks have better chemistry with Christian Cage than he ever had with Team Taz, than he ever had with Hobbs, than Cage has ever had with Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus? This is the team we needed all along. Talk about mentor and mentee.
Mhm.
Christian Cage, the heel that he is, working with Ricky Starks. I mean, we're talking about Captain Charisma and a guy who every single time we talk about him, the first thing we bring up about Ricky Starks is how charismatic he is. We're pairing Captain Charisma with the new Captain Charisma.
Yeah.
Last night, it was delightful. I loved it. And something as simple as grabbing the ropes. I love the old school stuff. The loaded glove, right? The untied turnbuckle, grab the ropes, grab the tights, roll up, all of those things. Cheat to win. It's classic heel stuff, and I dug it. I thought Punk did great in this one. I hear where Bret's coming from on the knees thing, although I felt a little bit like that was like, okay, it is Punk and it's the main event, so we're gonna kind of play the classics. Like, so I give him a break on that, just a touch. I do hear where you're coming from, right? I'm not saying like it was great, but it was a little bit like, yeah, no, he's gonna play the hits, and so he did, and it was what it was. It wasn't the greatest spot in the match by any means, but I did enjoy it for a main event, right? Like, it was fine.
Those high knees were great. I'm sorry, but they were just it was just like he was like desperate for that crowd moment, and you didn't need to play the classics to do that. All he needs to do is play a good character, and I feel like that has to do with the writing or maybe his own decisions when it comes to what he's doing and on show.
Yeah. What do you think, Ignacio?
Totally fair.
Well, I like I'm gonna take another stab here. I like Clark's point that they played some of the oldie stuff and he likes the old school stuff. And Clark, you would agree that they did a lot of old school theology here, or as far as a lot of old. Okay, well, according to David, that's the 80s stuff, and the 80s stuff doesn't work anymore. So I just want to take another stab at it.
I do. I enjoyed it. They used something as simple as grabbing the ropes. I really enjoyed it. I do think David enjoys that stuff too. I'll give him a break on that. But I hear where you're coming from after we had a fun debate on yesterday's show, without question.
Make sure you guys check that out if you haven't already. We got a few comments from Soul here. Firstly, he thinks that at All In, we might get Darby and Sting versus Christian and Luchasaurus. I'd be up for that. I'd love to see Sting, in person. He's somebody who I've obviously never seen wrestle before, so I absolutely would love that. And Soul's also saying the knee thing was supposed to be a tribute to Bam Bam Bigelow. The commentary stated it. I mean, I understand, both perspectives on that point. I mean, yeah, I think, to be honest with you, it worked. That's my personal perspective on the match. And it was very old school, and Collision has been very old school since it started a few weeks ago. They have taken a lot of inspiration from, a lot of old school wrestling, a lot of Nitro, a lot of WCW pay-per-views. I mean, that's where they got this entire intro from. It was the old WCW pay-per-views, how they'd, start them with them cutting promos. And I love that. I think it's worked fantastic. And I'm glad they're keeping it. They've also drawn some inspiration from WWE, like I said at the start of the show. So yeah, Collision feels a lot different. It feels a lot more old school, and it feels a bit more, dare I say, sports entertainment. But I personally don't mind that. And there's still dynamite for the people who don't like it. So yeah, altogether, I was a fan of this show. I thought it was fun, but that does bring us to the end of this show, guys. So thank you so much. If you enjoyed, please give us a thumbs up and a subscribe if you're over on YouTube. If you're on Spotify, a cheeky 5-star always helps. But thank you to Clark, Bret, and Ignacio for joining me here today. It's been a bang of an episode, and tomorrow we will be doing a Mailbag Monday, so make sure you submit your questions via Wrestling Republic's Instagram story, and we'll see you at 8 p.m. UK time 3 p.m. Eastern, and 12 p.m. Pacific. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
9 a.m. Hawaiian.